Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Giuliani, as your friend of years, I'm very pleased to join with my fellow commissioners in joining their words and also my own personal admiration for you over the years, not just for your public service over the years, but for the inspirational performance that you gave on that day after the attack as the symbol of resiliency of not only New Yorkers but all Americans, and very pleased and proud to say that to you. I'm I think the cleanup hitter here, so there are a couple things I want to catch on. But first of all, there's some confusion in my mind and others as to the relationship between OEM and the Port Authority. For instance, if the Port Authority at Newark heard that there was a plane headed for Manhattan, could they communicate to the command center of OEM?
Yes.
And
the Port Authority did have, and I'm sure continues to have, direct communication with OEM and frequent communication with OEM. Right. We did exercises and drills with the Port Authority on a fairly frequent basis, including simulating a plane crash for this very reason, to make sure that the Port Authority, the police department, the fire department, the Nassau County people could all respond correctly. So they have direct communication with OEM. And the building, the World Trade Center, I think, you'll have to check with others that know the statistics, I think it may have been the most responded to building in the city. So the police, the fire, the Port Authority were used to working together in that building. They do it like 7, 8 times a day.
Okay. Now, following up on something that Governor Thompson asked you, my question's slightly different. Despite all of Bob Mueller's good efforts, and he's really, grasped a situation and is dealing with it in anybody's mind who observes him. From your background in law enforcement and as a mayor and in your various public services, do you think that given the role traditionally, culturally, of the FBI and its strong emphasis on law enforcement, that that's an organization that can indeed not only perform law enforcement but also counterterrorism? Or would it be, in a perfect world, a better thing for us to consider putting that task and separating those tasks?
That's a very that's a debate that has pros and cons, and it's very difficult to decide which is a better way to do it.
But it's our messy debate. We need your help.
But you have to decide it and do it. I would say that there's probably more gain than loss by having it in the same agency, by having the criminal investigation and the counterintelligence for domestic purposes in the same agency, and that if we figure out how to have them communicating better, so that we don't have the wall and we don't have the separation and we have sharing of information, we're probably going to gain a lot more from that. If it were just a separate domestic counterintelligence agency, I think it'd be kind of isolated in terms of its ability to realistically pick up what's going on. When I was asked earlier by some of the other panel members about the work between the FBI and the local police, the FBI, and I'm sure the director understands this, but they have to accomplish it, has to think of the local police as arms of the FBI, because very often they're the ones who can pick up the intelligence that's going to trigger the possibility of an attack, like the one I mentioned, and there are probably a half dozen others where the initial information came about because of good street police work. So if you had just an intelligence agency that was separated from a law enforcement agency, I think it would tend to become even more isolated than the situation we've had with the FBI. The idea of having those relationships with police departments is a valuable part of their intelligence gathering.
Okay, thank you. One follow-up question, and one final question, excuse me. We haven't talked about the aftermath of 9/11, but I know that FEMA had a major role in the city, and I guess at one point there must have been some question as to whether there needed to be a federalization of the cleanup effort. And we really could use your comments on what happened, because we've had no information on that.
Well, the reason the city of New York is such a remarkable place, and I have such strong feelings about all of these people in the fire department and the police department and OEM and elsewhere, is they weren't attacked once. They were attacked in 2 months, 3 times, with attacks that would be considered historic in nature in terms of proportion. First, the attacks of September 11, 2001, then anthrax in NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, the governor's office, my office, a number of places, a new component of first time America ever had to deal with that. And then just a month later, we had an airplane crash in Rockaway, tragic, horrible airplane crash that at least in the initial moments appeared to be a terrorist attack. FEMA was remarkably helpful and played exactly the right role. Joe Alba came here within 24 hours. He took over the Javits Convention Center. They deployed search and rescue operatives from Indianapolis, from Chicago, from Baltimore, from Phoenix, Arizona. Governor Thompson will appreciate this. We had Chicago police officers directing traffic in New York City. I don't know where they send the people, but you know, they were directing traffic in New York City. And we got tremendous help from FEMA. I mean, and could not have gotten through it without all of that help. And they made the right decision for New York. It might be a different decision someplace else. Because you have all these resources. At that time, a 40,000 police department, an 11,000 person fire department, even with the terrible losses, a massive fire department. All of these emergency people, the Port Authority. The best role to play in New York is a supportive role. It would have been impossible for FEMA to take over the effort. They wouldn't have understood the intricacies of the city well enough to take over the effort. So they played the right role. If they moved into another place, I was in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after the attacks, and went to the high school and the field where the plane came down. And my police commissioner was with me, Bernie Carrick. And when we passed a local firehouse, both of us stopped for a moment and were stunned with the idea that it was a firehouse with 2 trucks that had to respond to what maybe could have been another terrorist attack. So, you know, that might have been a situation where FEMA would come in and FEMA would have to help and assist because the resources aren't there. In New York or Chicago or Los Angeles, these police organizations are going to be so big you got to kind of work with them rather than try to direct them.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.